Hello everyone, my name is Christian, welcome to my hobby blog. Today we are going to review a movie I just watched. I know I already uploaded a video tonight, but I ended up really loving this movie. This movie was really anxiety filled, very funny. This is the type of movie that I love to watch because throughout the entirety of it, it is just stress, humor. You get your little releases of tension and stress. And before we go on any more, I am, of course, talking about the recent release by Utopia, which is a Vinegar Syndrome partner label. Now I'm talking about Emma Seligman's Shiva Baby. I finally learned how to say that correctly through this movie, Shiva Baby. So this movie is, again, just anxiety filled. This isn't as insane as Uncut Gems, but it's still very much just anxiety filled. This movie is directed by Emma Seligman, as I said earlier, and she's a Jewish filmmaker who is also queer, I believe. She discusses her kind of her experiences throughout college and discusses how sugar daddies were like a big thing in NYU, where she went to film school at. And this movie is basically about Danielle, who is played by Rachel Sennott. She's the only non-Jewish actor in this movie, but the director kind of discusses this at length about how, aside from Danielle, she really wanted to make sure that she casted Jewish people for Jewish. Well, she wanted to cast Jewish actors and actresses for Jewish characters, and also queer actors and actresses for queer characters. So it was really interesting to see Rachel Sennott play this character, because I don't know anything about the Jewish experience. And so watching this movie kind of gave me a look, I guess. It's really interesting because this movie is about Danielle, who is again played by Rachel Sennott, who has a baby daddy or whatever, or not baby daddy, but a sugar daddy, who is really rich and is paying for everything for her. She talks about going to law school, and she has all these dreams and was talking to him about it, and then she has to go to Shiva, which is a funeral reception after the main funeral event. And while she's there, she talks with all these different people who are part of her synagogue, and she's there with her parents, who are just like at her ear the entire movie, telling her like, oh, it's okay to be, an activist and, this, that, and the other, but you gotta get a real job. And they're just like hounding her the entire movie. And then all the elderly people in a synagogue are like, oh, do you still do, this and this and this? And she's like, I haven't done that in like a decade. Like, no. And while she's talking with some of the elderly people, her sugar daddy walks in with his wife and child. And it just goes from there. It's just pure anxiety, stress, lots of clashes of egos. And Danielle at one point starts talking to her ex again, or is kind of reconnecting with a fling that she had during high school, who she went to prom with, and they're kind of going back and forth. And this movie was just really, really funny to watch, because I love stressful movies. I love movies where at the end I'm just like just like stressed out of my mind. And this movie provides enough releases in that stress that it's not overpowering. It's not Uncut Gems or Good Time by the Safdie brothers. This has releases, unlike those movies. Those movies just keep building until you're just like grasping your heart. But this movie is just so charming. Like, it was really fun to watch a new movie. This is from 2020, so it's a year and a half years old now. It's not long, and the director talks about this in the Q&A that is on this release. She talks about how she thought indie movies were gonna die during the COVID-19 pandemic, and so they made this movie like in the summer of 2019, and it never came out until 2020 because they had to do, whatever post-production and kind of shopped it around to various theaters. And she discusses how it actually was a huge gift to them to have just a huge amount of people sitting at home taking those chances that they usually don't when watching indie films. And so it was really kind of insightful to listen to her talk about kind of the pros and cons of being an indie filmmaker for this movie, or in this time too. But the idea of this movie first came about because the director wanted to make a short film, and a lot of film students were doing like sci-fi movies and period pieces and like all these really heavy budget epic movies. And she was like, well, I gotta stay with what I know, and I'm Jewish, and I have a Creole identity too. And so, I'm just going to write about that. I'm going to draw from my own experiences as these different aspects of life and who she is, and she's just going to write the movie. And she did. And as she was kind of shopping around for an actress, she met the main star, who's Rachel Sennott, or Sennott, and they met in the dorm because they were both students. Rachel was more of a theater student and was acting in like weird plays and stuff. She talks about how in one thing she was like eating rocks and reciting a poem, and she was like, I don't want to do that. I want to be in the movies. And so she and Emma kind of became like a power couple in terms of Emma would write the script and then Rachel would kind of edit it while she was writing a different script. So while they were going back and forth on the different drafts of Shiva Baby, they were finishing up school. And the director discusses how first she had this little popcorn kernel of an idea, and then it kind of expanded and then expanded, and it kept expanding until we get this movie that I watched tonight. But trying to see what other notes that I have, because this movie is just really amazing. I mean, I gave it 5 stars on Letterboxd, which I rarely do. That usually means that it's either perfect or very close to perfect in my eyes. And it gets the job done so well. And it was really funny because at one point of the movie, I kind of noticed the score for this movie, because it's just anxiety filled the entire time. And at one point of the Q&A, the questioner, whose name is also Rachel, she was like, so did you mean to do a horror movie score, or where did that come from? And the director said that she never intended on that, and she described the movie to the composer, and the composer was like, so you want a horror movie score? And she was like, yeah, I think I do. Yeah, go ahead and do that. and it works so well. It really adds to the scenes. It's very subtle. It's not like blasting you in the face with like trumpets or any other horned instruments. But I really like all the actors in this movie, but especially Rachel, who plays Danielle, because she is just really expressive in her feelings while also not, you know, being too crazy. She's very subtle in her acting. And she and the director talk about in the Q&A about how they were able to keep the tone of the movie on a fine line, because throughout the movie it could easily go too goofy, too dramatic, and this was something the director had issues with, and the actress was like, felt pretty confident in what kind of tone that she was going for, but the director had a really easy fix for any time she felt like she wasn't acting right. The director would say, "You're having a panic attack. You're having a panic attack." And she would easily just go, because the dialogue is very funny throughout. I mean, the director talks about how anytime she went to a Shiva, it's a really sad event, but everyone's talking about, oh, my son, graduated high school and is going to this college. And then some elderly person's talking about the health condition and talking about, oh, I just had a colonoscopy and, all this stuff. And it's really funny, the movie, but when you see Danielle and kind of focus on her, you see her acting and she is just not having a good time. Very stressed out, very anxious, and she really nailed it. And it's good that the director kind of knew the line to say to get her back into kind of what sort of role that she needed to be acting. Because there's one line in the movie when she meets her sugar daddy's wife, and her parents are like, "Oh, you have a job for my daughter, right?" Kind of nudging her, because they don't really have any confidence in Danielle. And the wife of the sugar daddy is like, "Oh, yeah, I need an assistant, someone to help me with scheduling and just doing basic office work if you don't want to do babysitting." Because that's that's Danielle's cover story. Because she's making so much money by being, on the receiving end of a sugar daddy. And so she says, "Oh, I babysit a lot," but in reality she has like one person and one kid that she's caring for. And so the sugar daddy's wife is like, "Yeah, just be an assistant," and Danielle is just kind of like, "Yeah, I just don't want to be one of those girl bosses." And in any other movie, I think that line would be very humorous, but in the specific context of the scene, it is so like, bam, like, "No, I don't want work for you. I don't want anything to do with you." And that kind of starts the relationship between the wife and Danielle, because Danielle receives a little bracelet in the beginning of the movie from her sugar daddy, and it's like, "Oh, wear this to your event," or whatever. And she's like, "Oh, okay." She just puts it on, not thinking about it. And she shows up to the Shivas, talking to people, and then he shows up, and she's like, "Oh, fuck. I didn't know that he, was coming. I didn't even know he was part of the synagogue," because she's not really religious or doesn't really feel beholden to the Jewish lifestyle or beliefs. And so the wife is kind of like, "Oh, I've seen that bracelet. I think I have the exact same bracelet as you." And she's like, "Oh, no, I've had this for years and years." And the wife is like, "Well, that's a new bracelet that just came out from the company," or whatever. And it's just like anxiety the entire movie. And I think I'm going on too long, because I didn't realize this would be such a extensive review. But one last point about the movie that definitely didn't detract from the acting is that the house that they were filming in wasn't an actual house and in an actual neighborhood. And the director and the actress who plays Danielle, they were both like, yeah, like we had to have air conditioners blowing all day when they were filming, but not during the actual filming. When they pressed record, they had to shut off all the air conditioning. And so it got really hot in the building really quickly, and they're supposed to be doing these, scenes. And they talk about how the makeup room was on the third floor of this house. It's a third floor home in a pretty nice neighborhood. And they talk about how they were running up and down the stairs constantly, having to fix their makeup. And they didn't even really have any trailers, because usually you do on a film set. But in filming this movie, they had bedrooms in the house on the third floor that they didn't use at all for filming. They didn't even show the stairs going to the third floor. They very expertly framed it out. That way, they didn't need to use all the spaces. They could use an entire floor for preparation. But they said that all of the scenes in that movie, it was, 90 degrees, 100 degrees. And talked about how they didn't have rehearsals, so while they were sweating, getting makeup on, they had to practice the lines with each other while they're sitting, getting the hair done or the makeup. And so, yeah, all of this just really comes together into one awesome movie called Shiva Baby. I love this movie. Again, I really, really like this. This is why I love Vinegar Syndrome, because they've been doing a lot of great work with the partner labels. This, I think, has probably been one of my favorite new watches, because I talk about how much I love Heavy Trip, but that one I'd seen already and kind of knew the film before I bought it. But for this movie, like, this was a total blind buy. I knew nothing about it. I heard it was like Tim and Eric. It's really not. It's not at all like Tim and Eric. It's more like the Safdie brothers, because Tim and Eric is more kind of like awkward humor and like surreal humor. But this movie is just anxiety and dread and awkwardness. And it really tapped into all my fears of people just going to a big event like that, where I haven't seen these people in years. They all want to know everything about me. And there's a really funny gag in this movie where every elderly person keeps telling Danielle, like, are you eating? You look like a skeleton. You need to eat. You won't find a boyfriend like that. And she's just like, oh my God, get away from me now. So, yeah, I think that's all I'm going to talk about. It's almost 20-minute review, but this is Shiva Baby, released by Utopia. It's a partner label of Vinegar Syndrome. This one was just such a shock to me. And I didn't show this in the haul video, but this is what the theatrical poster is, I guess. But I talked about the bagel suit, that it kind of goes beyond down here. The whole whipped cream or sour cream suit with bagels hanging off. That was actually a shoot that they had. Like, after the movie was done, they wanted to get, like, movie posters together. And they got inspired by a specific record. I didn't know it. I didn't think to write it down. But if you watch the Q&A, they talk about it. How they were inspired by some record artwork that was exactly like this, but it was more like, it wasn't as full as this one. This one was really filled out on every detail. So, yeah. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you guys check this out. This one was a real treat. So, thank you all for watching.